What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Swan Hockey Live. I'm your host, Eric Swanek. We've got Bill Underwood on the phone with us here, scout for the Kitchener Rangers in the OHL. Bill, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can.
What's going on? How are you?
All right, how's everybody out there? Good to be here.
Yeah, happy to have you here. Everything's great here. Another season coming to an end, so we're gonna talk about the 12 Tier 2 Junior A leagues in North America tonight. We want to give you guys this information heading into tryout time. We do remind you, stay focused on the task at hand, which is finishing the season. We're doing this episode to give some information, but the most important thing you guys can learn tonight is focus on today. Without a great today, there is no tomorrow, so make sure that you're focusing on the job at hand, finishing your season strong if your season's still going, and making sure that you're executing, again, heading into tryout time. But again, by the time the season's over, 80% of your tryouts already over. The in-season performance is the thing that matters most. There's lots of tryout camps and stuff that are opportunities for players. And then obviously training camps at the end of summer are, massive. But by the time the season's over, 80% of your tryouts already over as well. So just make sure you're focusing on finishing your season if you're still in the season. So let's, Bill, before we get into it, anything you want to add to that?
Well, just that really that's the crux of it. You've got to focus on your play and worry about next season when the time comes. Right now, you're influenced next season best by playing well this season.
100%. Right? Performance is king. We say it all the time. Performance is king. Perform. That's what coaches want the most, right? Everybody's always looking, how do I get to the next level? And it's, bare simplicity. Prove to a coach at a higher level you could help him win games. At the end of the day, that's all they want.
Sure.
So
for guys whose season is over, regular season and playoffs are over, there still are districts, there still are some spring events, and there's still some key things. And some of you are going to the tryouts, and you got to, any of the things you don't have to have a backup plan by making a youth team, and you're just going to junior hockey. If you're still youth eligible, think again. You may need that backup plan.
You should always have a backup plan. Not having a backup plan does not give your main plan any better of a chance of working out. Not having a backup plan is just foolish. And it's how a lot of people are left very, very upset at the end of the summer. So let's dive into this. 12 Tier 2 Junior A leagues in North America. Let's start in the United States first. We're going to start with, in my opinion, I would say what is the best Tier 2 Junior A league going right now? The North American Hockey League. If you would have asked me a year ago, I would have said it was the BCHL. In fact, I did say that last summer that the BCHL was number one. In my opinion, I think the North American Hockey League has overtaken the BCHL as the number one spot. With these new college rules, BCHL has lost a lot of players, and I think the North American Hockey League has shown a lot of stability. And, they've stayed true to the tuition-free Tier 2 model where BCHL, there's, some teams from what I hear are charging now. So I would say the North American League is your number one Tier 2 Junior A league at this point. And let's talk a little bit about that league. Bill, where do you want to start?
Well, I think it's a unanimous thing. I don't think anybody thinks North American League isn't number one now. The BC League, as you say, used to be. But now there's top Canadian kids that used to go there. Why are they going there? They can play in the CHL. And the ones that don't go to the CHL, the USHL is an opening as imports. So why would you possibly end up in the BC League now? When you could just play in the Western Hockey League, still be near home. If you're out west, if you're Easterner, stay closer to home and play in the East in Major Junior. It really is a case that the model of the BCHL, remember, was to become a USHL of Canada. Well, there's no more need for USHL of Canada. The CHL does the exact same thing now. So it's taken a big bloody nose. And even before that figure, the North American League was number two amongst Tier 2 leagues, definitely, and there's no question about that, I don't think. And now I do think they probably are number one. It's still going to be a very good league. People think about the CHL impact. There'll be an impact there, but remember where the impact's going to come. Canadians are staying at home, so that's going to have an impact on imports in the USHL. Not going to have any impact on the non-imports, just the imports, and they'll probably replace them with what Canadians they can get, be a little bit lower level, not the Celebrities anymore necessarily, but they'll also get Russians. There are tons of Russians over here that are imports. They're darn good players. And as far as the amount of Americans that are going to leave the U.S., there will be some, but I think people are thinking a whole flood of Americans are going to leave. that's probably a mistake. And to think that, they're all USHL players, they're all coming from one place. Some might have been playing prep school. Some would be national team guys. They'll come from all different sources. Now, will it have an impact? Of course it will. But people, I think, can also overrate that impact. So is a null going to be totally damaged? They'll definitely lose some players that normally would have played there. They'll be in the USHL now. But is it going to be absolute destruction for the rank and file of that league? Absolutely not.
Nope, I don't think it will either. So North American Hockey League, typically, so where do they typically send their players to? All right, so North American Hockey League, they typically, historically have sent a lot of players Division I, a lot of players Division III. I think you're going to start to see that change now a little bit. I think you're going to see Division III take the lead in the North American Hockey League. I think it's a lot closer than people probably realize already. But now, even with this change, because again, that's one thing that the North American Hockey League, they're tremendous at marketing, right? Like they're phenomenal at marketing. Every kid wants to play in North American Hockey League. Most of them don't even know why. Most of them forget that Tier 1 even exists. I was just having this conversation with somebody else the other day. It's Tier 2 junior hockey, right? So like a lot of these youth players growing up, they're all, my dream is to play North American Hockey League. Why? It's Tier 2. Your dream should be to play Tier 1 in terms of junior, right? But that's because the North American Hockey League, their marketing machines, they're very good at it, and they do have a very good product. But they're marketing machines, so they're very good at showing off all the Division I talent that they move Division I. I think that there's a lot more guys coming out of North American League that go Division III than a lot of people realize, again, because of the marketing strategies that they are very good at. But I think you're going to start to see more Division III players than ever come out of North American Hockey League. It only makes sense with all the new changes. So, if you would have asked me a year ago, where does North American League send their, majority of their guys, I'd say it's a healthy balance of, Division I, Division III. I think you're going to start to see, the scales tip a little bit more in the Division III, Division III favor. How much? Not 100% sure yet. I think it'll be noticeable. Do I think that there'll be no more Division I guys coming out of North American League? No, I don't think that. But I do think the scale is going to tip, and I think it's going to be at a noticeable amount. What do you think, Bill?
Well, there'll be a definite more shift towards more D3 guys, of course. But at the same time, it won't be completely dry, I think, of D1 talent. I think it'll be a little bit more. And again, as you point out, and it's important to point this out, that a lot of guys, this is not USHL. The North American League, a lot of guys already go to Division III. It's not like it's in the USHL where, it's almost universal, Division I. It never has been that way. Now, why a lot of guys are playing North American League, it's not only just marketing, it's a matter of, we all know how hard it is to make the USHL. And if you're not going to make the USHL, what's the next best thing to do? Just go to the North American League, which is why you see a lot of players have that mentality. They know they're good players, but making the USHL is be very difficult. And I think that's almost a tribute to the USHL, how hard it is to make that league. A little bit less so than saying, it's just purely marketing by North American. Like, it's also players having the common sense to realize, we're not going to play in the USHL. Where's the next best place to play?
Sure. But I think, and when I said the marketing, I think there's a lot of players that are at a very young age that want to play in North American Hockey League, and they don't have to make that decision yet. Right. Like, where I don't think they, I don't think they've hit the point of realizing, hey, this is where I fit. Right. Like, I think it's like when you see guys that are, maybe, Bantams or, U16 saying like, hey, my goal is to play in North American League. Well, no, your goal should be to play Tier 1. And then if you identify at a later age that, hey, I'm falling short of Tier 1, so I'm going to play Tier 2, then yeah, but so I think that's, a little bit of a side note, but I think it's very important for people to remember, set your goals where they should be. And then you pivot off of that.
It would make sense, but I think a lot of guys also, there is just that understanding. Like, there are a lot of guys will say, I want to play pro hockey. Now, of course, your dream may be the NHL, but a lot of guys they know they're not that super player. They're not going to say, I'm going to play in the NHL someday. My dream is to play in the NHL. They'll say, no, I want to play pro hockey, meaning the ECHL, meaning maybe American League, even in Europe. I think some young kids realize, I think they all deep down inside want to play in the USHL. Every single one of them. If you came up and said, what league? Honestly, true serum, where do you want to play? They'd say the United States Hockey League. Some would say the Canadian Hockey League. But the North American League, a lot will say, because they know that, well, gee, I look at the guys that are going there and look at how hard it is to get there. And, this is my top league. And so, it's like I don't think there's a single guy on my client list that if I said you could play in the United States Hockey League would say, I'd rather play in North American League. Nah, no, and most of them would be jumping out of their skin to get to USHL.
100%. But I'm saying, like, they
now if the rule changes, if the Canadian Hockey League, a lot would say the same thing.
Yeah, 100%. I just think that they should say that that's what their goal is, right? Like, there's a difference between changing your goal and then being open to all options, right? I 100%, you should be open to all options, right? But have your goal and set your goal accordingly and know what your why is. Now the types of players that do well in the North American League, this is a big thing for a lot of people that you need to understand. The North American League is an older, heavy league. So it's going to be geared towards those bigger, heavier players. You have to be able to skate in the North American League. There's no really hiding a bad skater in the North American Hockey League. If skating's your weakness and that's something that you're looking to, improve upon, you'd probably be better off, probably one of the Canadian leagues. But in terms of the North American League, what kind of players do well there? Typically, it's the older, heavier, bigger players. Got to be able to fly. Got to be able to skate. North American League. It's an old, heavy league. Very important for everybody to know that, understand that, realize that, especially when looking at different combine options and camp options, and the group of guys that say, "Hey, I'm an 09. I'm going to go to the North American League camps or whatever to get a look for, to try to make the team." It's probably only going to be a couple 09s in the league this year or whatever, if that. And again, like, in terms of going for the future, they can't draft for the future. So if you're going to a camp or a combine with the goal of getting drafted for the future, you're wasting your time and money.
I would say this, even more than that, you've got to be tough playing North American League.
Yes.
Little Twinkle Toes is not going to live for 5 seconds. You have a lifespan of 2 shifts. You've got to be willing to go in the corners. You've got to be willing to hit. You've got to play a physical game. You are going to be hit. I once had an NHL scout, a buddy of mine, scouts from Las Vegas, said to me, the most pro-like league in the United States is the North American Hockey League, meaning stylistically, more so than the USHL, NCDC, or any of them in the United States. They play most like a professional league. And he's right. It's a physical league. It's just a nasty league. And if you're not, and especially you go down to Texas, it's a very nasty conference down there.
Yeah.
You've got to be able to skate, you've got to be able to play, but you've got to be tough and you've got to be strong. Because if you're a type of player that doesn't like contact or doesn't thrive on not having open ice, you're not going to last very long in that league.
Yeah.
It's a league that you really, a big power forward, ideal place to be. A small guy that needs a lot of open ice, that, loves to go out there and just skate away, something that's probably not your league, unless you also have that added element to be able to take it a little bit. Now, just to say the big guy has to be able to skate, of course he does. But as I say, the toughness factor is vital in the North American League, because I know a lot of guys that could play in other junior leagues, including the Canadian Tier 2 leagues, wouldn't last for 5 minutes in the North American League.
Yeah. And that's a great point. Especially on the different divisions. North American League, every division is a little bit different. So even within the North American League, you might fit in better in certain divisions than others. That's something to definitely keep in mind when you're going through your process. To Bill's point, that South Division, Texas Division, it probably is the heaviest. It probably is the toughest. It probably is the most of a man's game. So definitely something to keep in mind when you're picking your spots of where you want to try out, or if you're offered multiple tenders in the North American League, you want to pick the one that, with the team and the coach and the systems that are going to suit you and your style and your needs the best. Great points there, Bill. Let's move over to the NCDC, National Collegiate Development Conference of the USPHL, NCDC. So they are the United States' other Tier 2 Junior A league. They do fall below the North American Hockey League. Some NCDC teams will probably say that they're the same. They're not the same. They're definitely half a step behind. But that's okay. Great league, and it's different. It makes sense that overall they might be half a step behind in terms of gameplay because it's a younger league, right? So it's a little bit comparing apples to oranges. So it's NCDC. It's going to be a younger league. Most of their players, they are especially now with the new rules, they're mostly going to be moving guys Division III. You probably, you might still see the odd Division I guy, maybe a younger guy, but they're going to be moving most of their guys Division III NCAA. And, in terms of college, they still may be moving guys to, to USHL or to Major Junior or to NA. But in terms of college, those guys are going to mostly be, if they're going directly from the NCDC to college, it's going to mostly be at the Division III level. I think you might even start to see some top end ACHA1 commits coming out of there with the new rules. And especially as people start doing their homework on ACHA1 and realizing that, hey, some of the situations might actually be better than D3 NCAA. What do you think, Bill?
Well, probably true. And I think that already the NCDC is largely all of that. They only have a few guys go to Division I out of that league, but it's a very good league. If you want to play Division III or want to move on, couldn't find a better league. And some guys will go to Division I. Now in the future, it'll probably be fewer, absolutely. But there'll be some, and there's some very interesting young players in that league. I know a lot of guys in other leagues really like watching NCDC. I know the North American League guys think very highly of the level of play there. It's and some NCDC teams probably could play in the North American League, but just wouldn't be very strong. There's a depth issue.
Sure, there's always crossover.
And NCDC has three different areas too, remember. Out west, it's not very strong. They're not getting the best players out there. New England, it depends on where you're at. South Shore is the best team in the league probably right now. Sorry, gang, out there, but they probably are. You have some other organizations up there that are, but then you have the tuition teams who aren't very good. And then, of course, you have the other division down here, in the Atlantic down here is a very strong division. It's all non-tuition. It's, they have the strongest division top to bottom. There's some really decent teams there that aren't going to make the playoffs. And whoever comes out of that division, whoever actually finishes second in that division doesn't win it. It's still going to be a very good hockey team. So I think you got to look at the divisions a little bit there too, because the tuition teams, fact of life, they're not going to get the same hockey players. The top players aren't going out west. They want to go where the eyes are on them. The best New England kids don't want to leave home or go very far from home. So it just stands to reason. The best teams in the north here, and the best division, since there's no tuition in this division here around us.
In the Atlantic.
Exactly. Atlantic division will be the best division overall. You'll have some very good teams in New England, and then the West is what it is. The West, honestly, it is what it is. It's more of an EHL-ish type caliber league, and I even
don't say that.
I don't know. The EHL, of course, proclaims themselves tier 2. A lot of us would debate that, but I won't debate one thing, that there are better than one tier 2 division out there, most definitely, and that's the NCDC West. Yeah, they got that one beat.
You think so?
I think probably, because I just look at a lot of good kids that play at EHL. It's close to home, and it's amongst the colleges, and they get some of the good Canadian kids down here. I just think that I've seen some guys go out there. I say, it's like, it's. I see. I've always had a tremendous success rate out of helping guys out of EHL get Division III spots at pretty good schools. So, I just think that the NCDC West, again, it's hard to see why a kid, unless you really love the outdoors, and want to be a cowboy, that's good. On the other hand, if you want to play college hockey, where do you want to be? First off, you'd be Division III player, so do you want to be 2,500 miles away from all the Division III schools? You're going to be 25 minutes away from the Division III schools. It's a simple answer.
So, it's a good point about the divisions in that league. So I agree with you there too. Like, every division, is not created equal in the NCDC, especially with, certain teams paying to play, or charging the players. It's, of course, they're going to probably get the weaker players. Why would you pay, $10,000 or whatever it is for something you could do on another team for free? Basically, I guess paying to be in the league at that point. What types of players?
Throw in there. If you go to South Shore or Utica or somebody like that, something, playing up against those teams, you'd probably add 10 points to your stats each year because you're playing against weaker teams.
Yeah. Well, those teams are pretty. Last time I checked, they're at the bottom of the standings. All 4 of them.
They're awful.
And here's the interesting thing: a lot of teams, they weren't even dressing their NCDC teams, I don't think, against them. Like, they're pulling up all their Premier and U18 kids, and they're still beating those teams.
Absolutely.
And a lot of people don't know that. They just see, like, oh, they're losing every game. Well, yeah, they're losing every game to, like, these organizations. Like I said, I think a lot of teams were using their premier players and their U18 players to play those games. So yeah, now what types of players do well in the NCDC? It's going to be a lot of speed and skill. It's going to be a little less tough than the North American Hockey League. It's going to be younger than the North American Hockey League. And gotta 100% gotta be able to skate, gotta be able to fly, gotta be able to skate. So, I would say that, if somebody's a little bit, if there's a good high-end player that maybe doesn't have the toughness or the size to play in the North American Hockey League, you'll probably fit in really well in the NCDC.
Yeah, you're probably a little bit more, if you're a guy that's that more open ice guy, that more finesse guy, hey, especially a smallish guy, there's another case. You'll probably improve your stats, improve your play, improve your health playing in the NCDC over playing in the NA. And just like, the great big guy, he'll be able to really demonstrate his game in the physical play of the North American League. That high skill guy that's a little bit small will probably put better numbers and probably be better served in the NCDC.
Yep. Agreed. Let's move over to Canada. So we're going to go from west to east. We're going to start with the BCHL. We mentioned it before. We're going to come back to it now. So BCHL, the BCHL, in my opinion, is going to be the biggest loser, and probably already is the biggest loser with the new NCAA rules. Because the fact being that, all these guys being able to go to major junior, the BCHL is in the same territory as the Western Hockey League, like Bill said before, right? So the USHL, you're going to still have guys that would prefer to play in the United States, want to stay closer to home, so they're not going to go and leave and go major junior. BCHL, it's in the exact same territory geographically as the Western Hockey League, so they don't have any of that. There's no kid that would rather stay out west, so he plays in the BCHL instead of Western Hockey League. It's the same territory. The other thing where the BCHL takes a major hit is they are what's considered a quote-unquote outlaw league. None of those players need trades or releases to go major junior. So the USHL, they can still price their players, right? They still have to trade guys to major junior. So they could still give the major junior team the go-home price. BCHL, nothing. Nothing. They don't have to release them. They don't have to trade them. So players can just pick up and leave the BCHL as they've been doing. As soon as this rule was announced, guys are just packing their bags and leaving. So the BCHL, definitely, in my opinion, and pretty much everybody I've talked to, the BCHL is a big loser in all this. It'll be interesting to see how they respond. And to be honest with you, it's going to be interesting to see what that league looks like next year. I don't think, I think we've already agreed on this show that it's not going to be what it's been in years past, right? We agreed on that 10 minutes ago. Historically, the BCHL moved a ton of their players Division One. Again, they were more along the lines of, the USHL in terms of what they were going for and the quality of the league. Like they were, I wouldn't say they were at USHL level, but they were somewhere in between the USHL and the NA. Now I think they're, again, in my opinion, knocked down below the NA. So where are they going to be sending players to? I think it's going to be kind of similar to the NA. I don't think they're going to get wiped off the Division One map, but I think they're going to get, less than they've ever gotten. I think they're going to get more Division 3 commitments than they've ever gotten. It'll be interesting. Or do the Division 3 players just kind of come to the North American Hockey League and the NCDC? I don't know. It's definitely going to take a hit. That I know. Bill, what do you make of this?
Well, the difference is they were a league that was very close to part of USHL, but not anymore. But however, you might see them go young. You might see a lot of guys that now are not quite ready for major junior to come in through there. You might see what we saw a number of years ago in Canada, especially with them being an outlaw league, seeing the league suddenly get inundated with young guys.
Yeah.
They're going to play major junior. Instead of playing midget, they'll bypass midget and play major junior. Play junior, then play major junior. For a while, the BC League had a lot of those guys. It has had less more recently, but they've had some, but less. Now they're trying for this other image. Now they might shift back to the image of being sort of a stepping stone league to the Western Hockey League. And it's something that wouldn't shock me at all. And I think you'll see Canadian leagues largely, if they're going to have to look, they're going to want to get high-end players, have to look at young leagues. Now, the one hitch is Hockey Canada is not thrilled with that. So the thing is, other leagues that applies to, not the BC League. The BC League can do anything they want. If they want to bring in all the really good young 16-year-olds who aren't quite ready for major junior, they could do that if they wanted. And, that may be an option for them to just simply say, okay, we'll go younger.
Yeah. And that's a good point. Where does BCHL move players to? They definitely move guys to major junior. That we're seeing. So yeah, I mean the BCHL on this whole list, the BCHL, like to me, it's the biggest mystery to me for next year. I mean, it's definitely the one out of everything we're going to talk about. It's pretty much the one that, I guess I would speak with the most uncertainty. But yeah, yeah, I mean,
Only they lose two good franchises. There's strong rumors that two teams in that league may go to the Western League.
yeah, Penticton and Chilliwack, which would be gigantic. Penticton, for anybody that doesn't know, Penticton's like, like the face of Tier 2 junior A hockey. Like they, even in the BCHL, like I mean, you could argue that you were better off playing for Penticton than, some USHL teams. I mean, there was not too long ago, they had two players. I think it was two players drafted in the same NHL draft. I don't know if it was both of them, but one of them was in the first round, like serious draft pick.
Two, I think went in the first round. And
it may have you. I think you might be right. It may have been two of them in the first round, right? Like, I mean, it's crazy.
Not mistaken, both Paul Correa and Brett Hall played in Penticton. I'm not sure, but I think they did.
You're probably, I believe you. You're usually right with that kind of stuff. I'm sure Penticton has a long list of high-end guys that, that played there. Very, very incredible, what they've done. So what types of players do well in the BCHL? Again, historically, I mean, things could change next year, but historically it's been players very similar to that of the USHL. So it's been a lot of, a lot of speed. Again, have to be able to skate in that league. That's always been what we call a quote unquote skating league. Have to be able to skate. I think you got to play with that toughness, but I think it's a little more open and, historically has always been a little bit more open in the North American Hockey League. So, speed, skill, really complete player. And before I lose this thought, I want to mention one more thing about North American Hockey League. Goalies typically do very well there. If you're a goalie that does well there, typically great things have happened to you. But yeah, BCHL, I think it's, definitely, I think there's a lot of skill in that league. So definitely the skill guys typically gravitate towards there. But I mean, really, I think it's been a pretty overall, complete league. I think they've had good size. I think, again, just, very high end skill in the league as evidenced by the, the NHL draft picks. Bill, I'll throw it to you.
I think that the BCHL, sorry, I need to interrupt, but BCHL, I always saw as a run and gun. I always saw as a run and gun league. It's something that USHL is much more defensive oriented. Scoring goals in the USHL is hard. The BCHL has always had the cowboy numbers. You see somebody with ridiculous goal scoring numbers. Used to back in the 70s, you used to see 100 goal men in the Quebec League once in a while.
Yeah.
The BCHL is a place you're most likely to see somebody with outlandish scoring numbers because it's a run and gun league.
I wouldn't disagree with that.
You have a lot of open ice there. You can really attack if you're, I think a guy that if he's that high scorer, that high flying scorer, doesn't necessarily like to back check very much, likes to score goals, ready to put the puck in the net, really put on a show and use open ice, he's going to really thrive out there and put up huge numbers. That same guy in the USHL, where he's going to be facing a much more defensive system, those numbers are going to wilt down, and he's not going to be the same player there. Is a different style of hockey. The USHL goals are really hard to come by. In the BC League, no, the scores can get kind of crazy.
I wouldn't disagree. I wouldn't disagree. I think I think that's a good point.
Yeah.
All right, let's move over one province to the right. Alberta Junior Hockey League. This one's interesting to me as well because the BCHL took 5 of their top teams. So I don't think the Alberta League is the same as what it was a few years ago. Typically, Alberta is going to be one thing you guys are going to notice with Western Canada, with the exception of the BCHL, is very, very tough, maybe more along the lines of the NA. The Alberta League, we'll start with where do they promote players to? So typically they've had a good balance of Division 1, not as much as the BCHL, but they've gotten a good amount of Division 1 players. I'm interested to see what their final numbers are this year, especially without those 5 teams, which is again very, very interesting. Because those teams had especially Brooks Bandits. They obviously accounted for a lot of the top end talent and a lot of the Division 1 commitments coming out of the Alberta Junior Hockey League. So typically they've sent guys Division 1. Guys have gone up to major junior. Guys have gone Division 3, probably Canadian University as well. Again, I think you're going to see, a common theme with a lot of the tier 2 leagues that have been sending guys Division 1. I think you're going to see those numbers deflate a bit. And I think the Alberta Junior Hockey League, you're going to see the same.
The thing about it is this: there's some guys who really use sports, of course, out of tier 2 leagues. But I think again, Alberta is going to probably have to look at the same thing as BC. Now they have a lot of teams around in Alberta in the Western Hockey League. They'd probably be advised to start looking at bringing in, giving some of those young kids a chance to play up a little bit younger. Now, whether that's going to happen or not, you have some very strong midget programs in Alberta. Where you'll really see those top kids out of Edmonton go to play tier 2 now. They might if there's a trend in Canada and if the WHL is in favor of it and if it can be worked out for them to have teams have that farm system scenario. But that's a lot. I think for every league in Canada, that's really the logical thing, to start looking at younger guys. But again, your Hockey Canada league, it's not as simple. Hockey Canada tries to be protective of their midgets, just like USA Hockey is. So, is it going to be so simple just to bring every top 16-year-old up to play junior these days? Probably not. But the thing is, I think that Alberta already was severely damaged. It used to be the second best league in Canada. It was severely compromised. It lost those 5 teams.
Yep.
It now is definitely it's not number 2 anymore. It's something that they've definitely went down, and the whole general effect of this thing, it's going to hurt them. But they were already jolted last year. So how much worse they're going to get than they are right now is it's not going to be like BC. It's not going to be the same jolt factor, but they'll decline a little bit. But I think right now, the real damage already was done.
Yeah, I think that that's a huge blow. You lose like 5 of your top teams. I mean, that's definitely a huge blow. What type of players do well in the Alberta Junior Hockey League? Now, historically, and I'd say even still true today, it's a very tough physical league. So the BCHL and the Alberta League were always 1A, 1B, right? Not anymore. But they were almost like inverses of each other, where the BCHL was at high flying speed and skill and more offensive, like Bill was saying. And the Alberta Junior Hockey League was right there with them, but reversed. They were very defensive. They were very tough. They were very mean. They were very physical. Very good league, but very, very tough league to play in, defensive minded, league, I would say, because of the toughness. So typically the players that do well in Alberta, you got to be, you got to be tough. You got to be tough. You got to play with that piss and vinegar. You got to be, got to have some size to you, and got to be able to skate. I wouldn't say it's a skating league like the BCHL, but it's you gotta have a good set of feet underneath you and edges and stuff, because again, a lot of physicality, you got to be able to stay on your feet. You got to be able to really, really battle in the corners and that kind of stuff. So typically those are those tougher, heavier players have always, those are qualities that you've typically had to possess to play in the Alberta Junior Hockey League. And I don't see that changing.
I think in every league today, you've got to be able to skate and have some hockey sense. I don't think any league really you can survive in anymore that way. So I think there's a commonality. To me, it's more of a light switch of how physical and how defensive the league is. Are you going to be a guy that can handle really is a really ultra physical league? You're going to be able to handle that sort of traffic. And, I think that's one thing. And also how defensive oriented is a league where really the strong team defense is played. Obviously certain players are strong defensive players will thrive more there. And of course, if there's a lot of traffic and it's a physical league, again, that small, lightweight, whippet is not going to survive out there. It's better to be in a different league. So I think the Alberta League, that is close to North American League. It's more for the big dogs and for guys, or for the little dogs with a really nasty bite. It's more of a league for that. It's not as much a greyhound league. The BCHL is a greyhound league. It's a place where you can stretch the legs and do it and really really thrive. You're going to this other league, these other leagues. No, it's more of a pit bull league.
Yeah. Yep. No, I agree. Moving on over to the right to Saskatchewan. I learned more Canadian geography doing this than I did in school. But yeah, so moving over to Saskatchewan, where do they promote to? Saskatchewan has been predominantly Division 3. Now they're, I mean, they used to get a decent amount of Division 1 commitments years and years ago. Now I think they're few and far between, probably only, a handful, if that, a year. It's typically, Division 3, probably Canadian University. Definitely will move some guys up to major junior, or maybe even USHL. But it's yeah, I think, it's, in terms of the NCAA, it's really, as of late, been a Division 3 league, and I don't see that changing. Again, with more awareness coming to ACHA1 and some of the things that those clubs have to offer that people were probably unaware of, and the opportunity there at those schools, I think you might see more guys going ACHA. But again, I think everything will kind of stay kind of status quo for the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League. To probably, lose some guys to major junior, just like everybody, just like, everybody's probably going to, but I don't think you're going to see a ton of, I think they're kind of just in their lane doing their thing.
Their heyday was really the 1980s. It's something that's been going downhill since since the 1990s. It started going downhill. The BCHL has risen. They've went down. They used to be the premier tier 2 league in Canada, but that just sort of began to go down. And
were they really? I didn't even know that. That's before I was born. The 80s, but
a lot of great players came through there in the 80s, and it was something that was a really strong junior league. But then as the 90s came in, it started to really dissipate slowly but surely. And by the 2000s, the BC League took over. Now, the thing about it is that the Saskatchewan Junior League, right now, even some SJHL players even end up in the NOL. I've seen some of their guys.
100%. 100%. They'll make the change.
It's a league that, again, it already has been where it is. So how much of a slam it's going to take is debatable. In fact, it may be a league that might have a funny other impact. You might see some major junior cuts down there. Actually, maybe an improvement of some of their guys. So
yeah, that's a great point.
Is it really going to bring it up to a higher level? No, but at the same time, I don't think it really have the same decline that the other leagues might. That now Alberta suffered a year ago, and the BC League is going to suffer now. It's not going to have the same decline. It'll probably be pretty much business as usual. It's the league is what it is. It's a tough league to play in. Talk about a physical league. It's a very physical league. Twin Flan, Manitoba, which is in the Saskatchewan League. Actually, it's right on the border. Hey, that statement to Saskatchewan League. It's halfway to the North Pole. Tough kids come out of there, like Bobby Clark. It's a place that there are no faint-hearted people welcome. So you've got to be prepared to play a tough game up there. And it's skill too, but it's a league that, again, the level of play, I just don't see it changing radically. And if anything, maybe some major junior cuts went up there. Some Saskatchewan kids are not bad kids that actually may bring it up a tick on the high end. I'm not sure. It may have an odd effect on them. Certainly they're not going to be top breed players or top prospect players, but some guys that maybe would have lasted a little bit longer might end up there.
Yeah. No, it's valid points with the major junior guys coming down. What type of player typically does well in the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League? I think it's kind of pretty similar to the AJ. I don't think, not as tough, probably not as defensive. I don't mean it how it's going to sound, but it's almost like the discount AJ League. I don't know if that's, again, I don't mean it how that sounded, but it, it's going to kind of be similar to the AJ. It's just historically never been as good. But I think, sorry, go ahead, Bill.
I'd put it provider. I'd say the old AJ League. The new AJ League, I'm not sure the gap hasn't closed a lot.
Right. No, it did. Right. The gap definitely has closed. Again, how much, what that's going to look like, but, has it closed? Yeah, 100%. But yeah, I mean, what type of players typically do well there? Like, again, it's going to be, similar. It's going to be, guys guys that could play tough, guys that could play heavy. Got to be able to skate, just like, pretty much all these leagues. One thing you're going to notice with that Western string of leagues, with the exception of the BCHL, but your AJ, your Saskatchewan, and then we'll get into the Manitoba in a second, but the Manitoba, you're going to see that those three leagues, that string of leagues out there, they're tough. You got to be able to play physical. You got to be able to play tough. You got to be able to persevere through physicality and be able to stay on your feet and be able to, not be, you get hit or something, not be slamming your stick and yelling at the ref. Like you got to be able to play tough and execute and play. And but yeah, typically those are the players that have done well out there. Those guys that, bigger frame, bigger body, heavier players, and again, can play with, can take the physicality and dish out the physicality. And again, none of it, when you guys hear this too, like, they're not goon leagues, right? That's not what we're saying. There's a difference, right? They're not goon leagues. They're tough, physical, a lot of men in those leagues.
Kids, remember, they're prairie kids, and prairie kids generally are tough kids. And so I mean, it's just a culture out there. They're generally tough kids, and so it's not like you say, it's not goon, but it's physical. They're going to hit. They're going to play a physical game, and they're it's not going to be a league that you're going to go out there and find just easy to skate in. The BC league is sort of an exception to the rule. They're a little bit different, but those other leagues, no, those are physical leagues. They always were. And now that's one thing. Even the BCHL historically has always been a high scoring league. You go to these leagues, they've always been places where you see the real physical, tough player come out of that. Good, solid, all around pro style player. They're leagues that are built more for that type of player.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I agree. Moving over, Manitoba Junior Hockey League. Honestly, I would say pretty much just everything I just said about the Saskatchewan League. Just repeat it. I think the Manitoba League is probably, I would say the Manitoba League might be a little ahead of them now. I think because, in years past, it's always been the opposite. I think that the Saskatchewan was slightly ahead of Manitoba. I would say it's the other way now. The Manitoba might even be a little tougher. I don't know. Might even be a little tougher. But, honestly, I think, to the two, where do they move players? I think it's everything we just talked about. I think it's pretty much going to be the same. You might see a little more Division I commitments out of the Manitoba League, and when I say a little more, I mean if the Saskatchewan, got two, maybe Manitoba got three. I think you're going to see like a little more. But again, just everything that we just said for both questions of where do they typically move players to and what type of players do well there. Again, I'd say it's pretty much, the exact same as Saskatchewan, maybe a little tougher in Manitoba. And, they do move guys to major junior as well. Bill, any objections to that?
Manitoba's gotten better the past few years, no question. At one time, it wasn't a very strong league, but now it's gotten a lot better in recent years. It's not a very populous province, and it's one that's gotten better the last few years, last 5-6 years. It's definitely gotten better than MJ. It's and right now it is something that probably is very close to that. Those prairie leagues all are sort of in the same boat right now. They all fell behind the BCHL, and of course major junior now is going to eat up all the best players from Western Canada. Before, the BCHL is eating up the bulk of them, and the Western League will eat up the bulk of them. When I say the BCHL, I mean the guys that weren't going major junior were going there. Now you're going to have guys going major junior, and so I mean it's more guys major junior. I think those leagues all sort of are in the same boat, and there's a little difference between each of them. There used to be a gap, and Alberta used to be number 2 and gap those two. That gap is closed since they lost those 5 teams. And it used to be a little gap between Saskatchewan and Manitoba in Saskatchewan's favor. I think that's closed. I think they're all very similar. It all comes down to which organization you're going to in those leagues, which team. That's a big question there. Which team are you going to? And if it's a good team, and honestly, they're not leagues that are inundated with Americans. There aren't a lot of Americans that are in those leagues. You have some, but not many. BCHL, of course, has an American team. But you have a few more Americans in that league. Typically, it's a little bit, for a whole variety.
No, who's in the? There's no American team in BC.
Well, they've had the team in Washington State. They've had their.
Yeah. But I'm saying they're not in the league anymore.
Well, not anymore, but they have had it. I'm saying.
Yes. Yeah. Wenatchee.
Yeah. They had Wenatchee. Yeah. So, but I'm saying the point is they were in there at one point, so they have been more on American recruiting. So.
Yeah. Yep. And one thing I'll say too, guys, like,
sorry, but I said had. I don't know if you heard that right off the phone.
yeah, and I could have heard you incorrectly. Yeah, one thing I will say is that, these are the leagues that a lot of guys, don't know what they're about and choose not to play there. And it's probably one of the biggest mistakes you're making in your hockey career, especially for the Americans. You get cut from the NA and you don't take the time to learn about these other leagues and you go play tier 3 somewhere. There is not a single tier 3 league that I would take over any of these leagues that we just spoke about. So the guys that don't take the time to do their homework and look into this stuff, I think you are just being completely foolish. These are like those leagues that you didn't want to play in, but when the dust settles, you wish you had. So I just want to point that out.
I think it all depends. Like NCDC, I do think if you're out of the North American, like the NCDC, there are a lot of virtues too. Because look, if you're not making the NA, what are you? You're typically a Division 3 player. Now, where are most Division 3 schools?
Yeah, but NCDC's tier 2, right? I'm saying like tier 3, right? I'm saying like there's guys that might choose to go tier 3 instead of Manitoba. I think it's a mistake.
Absolutely. But I'm just saying, if you're cut by a North American, like the first place to look is NCDC, because it's something that, it's something that, again, stylistically or whatever, it's a good league.
I think it depends.
Well, it depends. But I think tier 3, the beautiful thing is this. Let's put it this way. Tier 3, it's better hockey than tier 3. But these Canadian leagues are tier 2. The thing is, I would say this. How many D3 teams can go up to Flin Flon? They can't afford to send scouts up there. How many can afford to go to Boston? Everybody. So therefore, you're sitting right smack dab. Remember, guys that take a look at a map of college hockey too, where are all the Division 3 schools? You look at them, they're clustered, New York State, New England. The vast majority are out here. There are a few out in Minnesota and out in the Midwest and spread elsewhere. But the epicenter is New England and New York State. Where's NCDC? New England or New York State, and also close. So a Division 3 coach wants to watch NCDC. It's a short ride down the road. These teams, remember, don't have budgets. They don't have big staffs. They don't have big budgets. If you're your typical Division 3 team, I can't send a guy out to Manitoba or Saskatchewan. I can't afford it. There has to be going on hearsay, and to be going on Instat, and be going on secondhand information by and large. I'm going to barely see it.
Yeah, I mean they have their ways. I mean, if you asked any Division 3 team if they would take Flin Flon's best player, I think every single one would say, "Yeah, give him to me right now."
Oh, I'm not saying they wouldn't, because there's some Division 3 teams that need players. But on the other hand,
no, I'm saying I think any team would be happy to have Flin Flon's best player. I mean, like Flin Flon's a very good organization. Like, there's some very good players there.
No question, but you sit down and look at the New England kids, the New England teams. They'll say, "Oh, I know this kid. He's from Boston. I know him. I'm going to take him." There's a familiarity thing there. They know these guys. And again, do I think there's a preference? Yeah, absolutely there is. It's like you go to, there are preferences that teams have, and I think most definitely they prefer to take an American kid on. And remember, it may get tougher to get foreign students in the United States. They want to go the easy way, try to say, "I'm bringing a Canadian in. I'm giving him a scholarship." Or I'm going to give a scholarship, it might not even be a whole scholarship, to a kid from right here in New England. They're going to take that kid from New England. And they're going to be more familiar with him. They're going to know him. Yeah, he's played great in Flin Flon and all that.
I don't disagree with that. That's why, but that's why I say it depends on the player, right? Because what you're talking about is the player going directly from typically a player that's in his age out year going to school, right? For a younger guy, it might be different. A guy that's trying to go major or junior. Yeah. That's why I say it depends on the player. For a 20-year-old that's looking to go to school and looking to go Division 3, yeah, I don't think you're wrong. But
and as far as going major junior goes, honestly, look, if you're not a Western kid, if you're a kid from New Jersey, you can't go to the Western League, regardless where you play junior hockey. You've got to go to the OHL. Now, I can tell you it's an OHL.
No, of course. Well, or you could transfer to the Quebec League.
Well, but
yeah. I mean, I like I said, it depends. It depends. For me, it depends on the player, right? Like,
I think for Western Canada kid, it makes a ton of sense. For an American kid, there can be a degree of sense, but
yeah, that's what I'm saying. It depends on the player, right? For a Western Canada kid, it might make sense. For an American kid, it might not make sense. That's what I'm saying. Like, it depends on the player.
I think a lot of American kids have had it rough when they went out there, because it's something that, again, they find out that, number one, it's hard to make those teams. You're far from home too when they cut you, or if they don't play you. It's I'm not saying it's for every kid. Yeah, for every kid there's a different formula. Right?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It depends on the player.
Yeah. I just think that playing the odds, playing the odds, it's very tough for me to tell a kid to go out there unless there's a lot of assuredness. There has to be a lot of certainty going on out there that, yes, he's going to be the top player. He's going to get that ice time.
But see, and I don't want to get too far off topic because we got like 6 more leagues to get through in 10 minutes. But so I don't want to get too far off topic. But in terms of like, being assured and risk and stuff, there's a ton of risk in the NCDC, right? Because if you play a game in the NCDC past September 30th, you're ineligible for Hockey Canada for the rest of the year, right? So if you go to NCDC and you play in October, and you fuck that one up in October, you're done, right? Like you're going to be playing tier 3 at that point. So like there's risk in different, in different situations. Like that's why, guys, like you have to perform, right? As a player, you have to perform. If you get cut anywhere, it's not going to be good.
But gang, if you're asked by the NCDC as an American, if I'm the Flin Flon Bombers, I'd be excited about taking it anyhow. No. On the other side, according to NCDC, you're coming down from up there and you have to come and make the team after they've already taken guys at the battle USHL cuts, North American League cuts. You're suddenly just another face in line in October coming in with all those guys. The USHL has bumped out a spot.
Yeah, you got to be good. You got to be good, right? You got to be able to play it, right? Like getting cut from anywhere, it's not good, right? Like if you're getting cut out of the Saskatchewan League or cut out of the NCDC, like you might not be somebody's first choice for Division 3 anyway. So all the visibility or none of it matters, right? Like you got to focus on getting your level of play up. Yeah. So let's head on now. Let's head on over to Ontario. So the next league east of Manitoba is going to be the Superior International Junior Hockey League. This league is, where do they send most of their players to? It's a Division 3 league. It's a Division 3 league. They'll send guys to, Canadian University probably as well. It's the SIJHL is the weakest tier 2 junior A league there is. I think not to say that no player should play in it. I think that, again, depends on the player. If you're not capable of playing in one of the stronger leagues or getting a regular shift, it could definitely be used as a springboard. I mean, me personally, I've had success with it. I mean, I had a player that, played there next year. He was drafted 6th overall in the North American Hockey League. So I've seen it work firsthand. But it's, where do they promote to? It's, you're going to be typically, if you're going to college, you're going to be, I would say puts you typically in the same boat as the tier 3 leagues in terms of college promotion, where you're going to be looking at Division 3 or maybe even ACHA. But typically with with the SIJHL, you want to get in, solidify your status as a legitimate tier 2 junior A player. You got to dominate. And then, I would say they move a lot of guys to higher, better tier 2 junior A leagues.
I think the word is almost tier 3. They are a league that is way down in the pecking order there.
I would say they're the lowest level tier 2 junior A there is.
It's a league that you want to get the heck out of, and so it's a league that it has its purposes, but it's the league you don't want to. By no means do you want to be there as 19 or 20 if you can possibly avoid it. It's a league that is like I say, I think we agree it's the lowest tier 2 league. If you want to, talk, it's lowest tier 2 league.
Yes. Yep. I mean, what type of player does well there? It's a pretty rounded. I wouldn't say it's over the top physical or over the top skilled. It's pretty rounded. It's just going to be a lower level. And that's fine. Some guys need that. And, again, I've seen it work out great. But you got to perform. You got to dominate. If you go there and you blend in, no, you're not going to move up to a better level tier 2 junior A league. Cause why would you? You didn't dominate, you blended in, right? They're not looking for blending in.
That's another geography league. It's something that, again, a lot of people get a chance to go see. And remember, people talk about Instat and all that. We still like to see you at games, like to shake your hand, like to meet you. And so Instat will never replace that. You've got to go out there. You're not going to see a player's body language. You're not going to see a lot of the other little things you like to know about a player by watching on Instat. And you like to meet the guy. And when you get to some leagues, it's just a matter of, it gets hard. You got to, again, gang, think of what level you're going to. This isn't Division 1. This isn't Boston University. They don't have a big budget. They have a minuscule budget, minuscule staff. Where am I going to send my guy this weekend? Tell you what, the cheapest place, the place can I see them. They can see the most players efficiently.
No, I understand. And then I think it's worth noting too, like they will move, some guys to major junior. You'll probably see maybe I would say a good amount of the major junior movement will be guys that are young, drafted, and with Hockey Canada, you can't leave your province until you're in your 18-year-old season. So it could be a guy that was good enough to go play in the Alberta Junior League, but he's 16 years old, so he can't leave. So he's playing local, and then he makes his OHL team at 17. So you will see that.
Well, I can tell you in OHL, we don't think very highly of that league overall. It's not a league that we really farm our players out to a lot. That's not a league we watch a lot. Central Ontario League, which we'll be talking about soon, is much higher up on the food chain, and even to the degree that OJ is higher up on the food chain that way, and so you could argue would be the no J a little bit less so, but it's but this league. I'm not saying that we ignore it, but I'm saying to say we scout a great deal. No, we don't. There's something that we see. We don't see a lot of guys in the Centrals list ever out of that league in terms of young guys. Of course, playing them up is another matter in their draft year. And in terms of where our guys typically are, it's I'm not going to say there are none. You're right, there are some, but to say it's like you see in the DCHL, no, nothing like that. Or the Central League. The Central League is a more likely place.
Yeah. So. All right, yeah, so let's move on over. So Northern Ontario Junior Hockey League. Northern Ontario Junior Hockey League, they've really, I don't know, I think they've gotten better. I think the SIJ, the Superior International League, has gotten worse, but those two leagues used to be pretty similar. The NOJ was always a little bit above it. Now I think that separation has definitely increased. Northern Ontario Junior Hockey League, they will promote, in terms of college, they're a Division III league. Some ACHA, probably some Canadian university as well. They will also, move guys to OHL. Obviously they're, again, what we just spoke about with territories and stuff. So there's some of that going on. And I would say, even though it is, I would say now head and shoulders better than the Superior International Junior Hockey League. In my mind, it's still a springboard league. It's a place you go, solidify your status as a legitimate Tier 2 junior A hockey player by dominating, and then you would look to go to a higher level junior league, which happens a lot out of that league. So yeah, for me, that's typically where they'll promote to. The top teams in that league, very, very good. Probably way better than a lot of you guys think. A lot of guys that think that they're probably a shoo-in for those teams might not even be able to make them. It's a I've had guys go there and underestimate it, and they get there and they're like, oh, like, I got to work. I'm like, yeah, you got to work. But yeah, typically for promotion, I think, again, another springboard league in terms of NCAA. It's a Division III league. I think they do get the odd Division I commitment, but they're few and far between. But yep, Bill, take it.
Well, I didn't mean to say we don't need respect for that league or much respect for that league. What I'm just saying is we don't have a lot of guys out of it. I should rephrase it that way. Got a lot of guys out of there. But as far as a no-J goes, again, the problem is its geography. They're sort of out there isolated. And again, remember, they're not the places where the kids necessarily want to play. And so you have a case that kids, it's very transient, like you say. There's those two leagues, it's not to say they're totally bad, and we certainly do pay attention as much as we can. We just don't have a lot of results out of there. We don't scout them as much. We don't have scouts out that way as much. We have some in the no-J region. Out west further, we don't really have a lot of scouts. And you look at it in terms of the no-J, we have a few more there. But again, we come to the Division III problem. That limited budget, and they are up there. These are not easy teams to go see. You do get results there, but to say you're taking the easy route to Division III, you're not taking the easy route. You can get there out of it, but it's not the easy route. Will you be seen as much there as another league? No. And that's the problem you run into. But it is a hard league, and I'd say it is better than the Superior League, and I'd say it's a league that again, it is what it is. There's some decent players there, but it's a stepping stone league.
Yeah. Yep. And again, like, I mean,
it's like a superior league.
Yeah. And, like me personally, I've had tremendous success with that league. Like, I've had, like Logan Fredericks, he played there at 20, committed to Wisconsin Stevens Point, which is arguably one of the best, if not the best D3 NCAA program there is. Won a national championship with Stevens Point, went on to play pro hockey. Like, I mean, I've had a lot of success with it, but yeah, like I think, the number one thing that comes to my mind with that league is springboard. What type of players typically do well there? It's going to be a good, overall balance. Again, and this is going to be a trend with Ontario, not overly offensive, not overly defensive. It's a good, a good balance. One thing I will say, if you are a guy that has all the tools, but is lacking skating, could be a place, because some of these teams, they play in smaller buildings. It's going to hide your skating. So if you're a guy that, your skating ability is what's keeping you out of, some of these higher end tier 2 junior A leagues, well, maybe going to a team in the NOJHL that plays in a small, you're going to play half your games on a small sheet of ice, and then really putting in the work to refine that skating and have that match up to your skill. That's a player that I think could be, could benefit from being there. But yeah, it's just a pretty balanced style of play, which I think you guys are going to see as a common theme here in Ontario.
Yeah, I say it's probably about good much. Oh yeah.
Yeah. So all right, well, we'll keep on moving east then. So we'll go to the Ontario Junior Hockey League. So Ontario Junior Hockey League, where do they promote to? And I think Bill's going to attest to this in a minute, but I think good amount of major junior movement. They, historically have gotten, decent amount of Division I NCAA, which, just like every other league, is probably going to be impacted now. Definitely Division III, probably some ACHA 1 as well. It's probably some Canadian university. You'll also see guys not only go to major junior, but you might see guys move to league, to higher level, the NA, which we've, said is the, number 1 tier 2 junior league there is. So you might see some movement to the NA, maybe some movement to the USHL. But yeah, they've, pretty good league. Probably some, level of compromisation. I don't even know if that's a word, but I think you guys know what I'm trying to say. Part of it's compromised now because years ago they did go pay to play. So anytime you introduce pay to play model, you obviously have a budget you got to hit. Now you can't necessarily take the best players you can find. You got to take the best players that you can find. That also add up to X amount of dollars. So, Bill, what are your thoughts there?
I'd say that's very accurate, except for one other thing. The OJHL has really gotten big. And so you really got to pick your organization well there, because some organizations are strong, other organizations aren't so strong. It's not what the league's brought in so many teams. It's kind of a little bit bloated. It's not. There's definite difference between organizations. So I think it's a league that has really spread itself out.
Yeah. Yep. No, I could see that. And they were very big there for a while. I think they've starting to tighten up now a bit. Probably, maybe not to the point that they, I don't know if it's to the point that they need to or not. But yeah, definitely, it's gotten compromised, but, very, still good league. What type of player does well there? Typically it's a well-rounded player. I think that's going to be very similar to like an NHL style of play, similar to OHL style of play. It's well-rounded player that could skate, good skill, got some size, guy just good overall. If you're lacking, you don't have to be overly, you don't have to be the physical monster as maybe you do out west. Maybe monster is not the word, but you definitely don't want to be lacking physicality. You don't want to be a guy that shies away. Just I view the OJ as just a good, well-rounded overall. Good rounded overall players. Bill, what?
And of course, I'd agree absolutely. And the thing I would put in about OJ, as well as the OJ and the league out in Superior, not as much league out in Superior, but our NOJ and OJ kids that end up going to the NCDC. Again, to put it in perspective versus US leagues, our kids that actually move from that league to play in the NCDC. I don't see the other way around. I see guys come down here to play. So I think that says something about the NCDC, that some of those Canadian kids, the OJ, and I even seen some of them come down to play in the EHL. So to say that, again, there's that bloating factor is very good for some kids, but for other kids, obviously they're finding tier 2 and even tier 3 USA hockey a better option for Division 3 down here for exposure. And, so there, you have to keep that in mind, that it's a good league, but it's you put the perspective of the American leagues, the American leagues, again, there are kids up there that are coming down here. That's kind of interesting.
Yeah, no, it is interesting. Let's keep moving on east. So CCHL. So CCHL, where do they promote to? I'd say very similar to the OJ. I think, and I think that, that league's definitely been compromised as well. I want to say it's been compromised maybe more than the OJ with the pay to play. I think that league, that level has probably dropped more than the OJ has over the years. It's, they used to have some really, really impressive things going on in that league. I don't think you see as much of it anymore. I mean, I remember there was one year that, this is going back years when I played, like I think it was the Smiths Falls Bears. Like, I think they had 3 guys drafted in the same NHL draft. I don't really see that happening anymore. But yeah, I think it's pretty similar to the OJ in terms of where they're pushing guys to. What do you think, Bill?
I think a Central League is a little bit better.
You think it's a little better?
Yeah, we go to the OHL draft. There are a lot of pretty darn good Ontario kids and hold out to play in the Central League. And I think also, and now you see less of that now. They'll be compromised in that, no question. Those Ottawa Valley region kids, and you're going to see that compromised a bit. But the other interesting thing about Central CCHL is, remember, the NCDC and CCHL were talking about an interlocking schedule at one point. There was some talk about that.
That would be interesting, and I do remember that talk.
Yeah, they are. I think as a whole, the thing about that is, again, OJ is so bloated. You don't have the weak sisters in a CCHL that are quite the same. And you also have, in this state of sexual equality, weak brothers, maybe we'll say. But the bottom line is you don't have those weako teams as much. And they're probably more financially stable as a whole than a lot of the tier 2 teams in the OJ. Because OJ, some of those are in some really, really tiny places. And, and sometimes they're also concentrated too much in some places. And so I think they're both, I think the CC probably, I'm not, and as you say, the gap has probably definitely changed the past few years, and definitely now with new rules will change. But I think they're overall, I always thought they probably had a slight edge, simply because, again, you have good OJ and bad OJ. In the CC, I don't think the bad is nearly as bad.
It's tighter. The CC's tighter, and I think it's also, and you might be able to answer this better than I can, Bill. I want to say the CCHL has less, or I should say more full-time coaches, where the OJ, you talk to a lot of coaches in the OJ and they're calling you back later like, oh, sorry, I was at work, right? Like, where they're kind of coaching on the side, and that could just be for some of the weaker teams or the smaller, market teams or whatnot. But I think you see less of that in the CCHL.
I think it's a stronger league as a whole in terms of its business model, in terms of its backing, in terms of its number of franchises. It's kept itself a little bit more tight, a little bit more elite, and But again, to say that every OJ team is bad, no, it's not. The OJ, I wouldn't say, again, we're dealing with overlap there. There are some teams OJ that definitely be very good in the CCHL, but I think the bottom end of the OJ really would have a hard time in that league. It's sort of like we talk NCDC versus North American League. You take South Shore. Will they be the worst team in the North American Hockey League? I have a hard time saying that.
Right.
Would they win the league? No. On the other hand, you take like the Boston Bulldogs. They would not they would lose by a touchdown every game in the North American League. They could not survive.
Touchdown might be generous.
Yeah, exactly.
Because did you see that the Binghamton NA3 team played the Elmira NA team, two preseason games?
Yeah.
They got I think they got over 10 gold twice.
Yeah, it's just it's just a big gap between the two.
I know. It's crazy. Like, you feel like that shouldn't be able to happen one level to another, but yeah, it's the gap. And And like, again, parents need to realize that, because, there's a lot of parents that, the NA3 brands themselves as, hey, we're the step below the NA. We're going to get to the NA. And then, hey, you're getting 10 gold.
The truth is, they're again, you can't put in the category of the Boston team. The Boston team is an EHL team. And
yeah.
The EHL is a superior league to the NA3, definitely. And NA3 isn't.
Well, I would say it's tighter. I mean, the EHL to me, like in terms of tier 3, and and I know everyone's they're tier 2. They're not tier 2. They're a tier 3 league. But in terms of tier 3, they're definitely the tightest league, right? Like I would take, the top of the NA3, they'd be fine in the EHL, right? But it's the bottom, like the EHL has been the most consistent in terms of tier 3. Like if I was, if I was taking, if I was throwing a dart at a dartboard and whatever it landed, that's where I had to play tier 3. I'm throwing that dart at the EHL board 100 out of 100 times. It's definitely, it's the most consistent. It's the tightest. But, the top of every tier 3 league, I'd say it's all interchangeable. I mean, I like the top of the USPHL Premier.
The EHL, there's a little bit of a distant difference. They're a little bit of, but I think the USPHL is closer to them. I think, honestly, a top team's USPHL. Because USPHL, remember, as NCDC support. The NA support of NA3 is really, there is no support.
No, maybe a little bit out west, but not, but
the relationship is minuscule at best. Whereas the USPHL, it's not going to say it's tight, but there's a relationship there, definitely at NCDC. And the EHL operates totally differently. They're an independent league. And they just go out and sign the best players an independent league can get, and they do a very good job at it. So, but anyhow, back to what we were saying about the CCHL. The CCHL is the king of Ontario, probably, except if you're going to do some rankings and put some OJ teams intermixed in there. Yeah, but as a league, it's the best league because, again, that bottom part of the OJ that'll definitely drag you down. A league is only as strong as its weakest member. People have to understand that. Leagues are only as strong as their weakest member.
Right. Like when we're talking leagues, we're talking about leagues on a whole, top to bottom, right? That's why, guys, it's so important, the team that you play for. So important. What type of player does well in the CCHL? I can't remember if we answered this already or not. I don't think we did, but it's going to be similar to the OJ. I would say maybe even a little more physical than the OJ.
Yeah.
But again, just good, well-rounded hockey. Got to be able to skate. Got to have hockey IQ. Got to be able to think the game. Got to, if you're lacking, if you're shying away from physicality and being soft, probably not the place for you. Again, not that it's overly aggressive or super physical like the Western leagues, but just if you're soft, nope, you can't. You're not gonna be able to play there. It's a good, well-rounded league. That's my opinion. OHL Scout, what do you think?
Typical Ontario hockey. It's the same thing. It's a well-rounded player. You want a well-rounded player, and that's what it boils down to. Like every league in Ontario is pretty much like that.
Yep. Yeah. So every league in Ontario has similar style, and you see the similar style out west. We got 2 more leagues left. We're gonna head over to the Maritimes Hockey League. So the Maritimes JrA Hockey League. Where do they typically promote to? Major Junior. Quebec Major Junior Hockey League, or again, now as it's called now, Quebec Maritimes Junior Hockey League. They will also promote to Canadian University. You might have a few Division 3 guys coming out of that league, not really any Division 1. Worth noting too that I don't really think most guys in that league want to pursue NCAA. You could see that change now. You could see even more movement, between them and the them in the Quebec Major Junior League now, because I think the Quebec Major Junior League is going to be attracting more talent. So they're going to probably, I would imagine, utilize that tier 2 system more now. So you might see more movement, because, depending on if the players come. If the players come, I think you'll see more movement. If the players don't come, maybe you don't see much of a change. But typically that league has been, Quebec Major Junior pipeline, and Canadian University for the most part. And like I said, the odd, some guys, in terms of NCAA, more of a, more Division 3.
Honestly, it's a pipeline in 2 ways. Some young kids come through there, but a lot of kids are Quebec or QMJHL cuts that end up down there. It's you have a lot of recycles that go down there. Because the really young top kids, remember, come right out of midget AAA into major junior. In Quebec, you don't have a lot of kids play Sage up in Quebec or play Maritime Junior. You have the kids out of those AAA teams go right into the league. But a lot of times you get those guys that weren't quite good enough. And a lot of those don't have NCAA eligibility anymore. Even some Ontario League rejects end up out there. So it's the league that gets that a lot of the best players are older rejects actually that have come down there and are playing out and going to go to Canadian college.
Yeah, and maybe you see those guys go back up, right? So kind of like a little bit of an up down, almost maybe a little bit like a minor league system. For pro hockey in the United States, in that aspect. But, again, now with the new rules, maybe we'll see more guys going NCAA because, again, or maybe not. Honestly, it depends what happens if Division III changes their rule, right? If Division III doesn't change their rule, then you might not see any more guys going going NCAA. If Division III changes the rule, then maybe you will see more guys going NCAA because it's important to note too that, a lot of guys that, it's not that the league's bad, that's why guys don't go NCAA. Guys don't go NCAA because, to Bill's point earlier, a lot of guys, they just don't have eligibility. They played major junior, they get sent down, and they just don't have the eligibility to go. So I think it'll be interesting to see if Division III follows suit with Division I. If it does, you might see more NCAA commitments out of there. But typically that's what it's been. What type of player does well in the Maritimes Hockey League? I would say definitely got to be physical. It's I want to say it's a decently rounded league, not as, probably not. I've never thought of it as good as the CCHL. So maybe kind of a same way we compared the Saskatchewan league playing second fiddle to Alberta, maybe I would describe that a little bit the same here, of the Maritime League playing second fiddle to the CCHL. Again, it's been kind of, I don't know. I really don't know. It's hard to describe, like, because there's like a little bit of like a odd factor to it too, like where, because these guys don't have their eligibility and for a lot of them, their best days may be behind them, right? So that kind of plays a little bit with the psyche too, right? Like where they may not be able to find that extra gear playing that same way because they're kind of, some of them in a way might just be playing out their eligibility. What do you think of that, Bill?
Well, you got to understand one thing also about Maritime League is kind of isolated from a lot of players. Maritimes are not very thickly populated provinces. They have some good hockey players, but it's not as populous as a province like Ontario. And most kids in Ontario and other places would rather not go out there. And it's not the richest part of Canada either. That's another thing. So to say, now, again, they do find ways to get guys to play there, but at the same time, remember, a lot of their best venues now are in the QMJHL. They don't have a lot of those venues that are going to have the economics to really go out and bring players in. So to me, I've always found it to be a league that is when I think of Maritime Junior League, I think of Atlantic colleges in Canada. Those youth sports teams in Atlantic provinces. That's a good source for talent for those teams. It's I think that's where a lot of their players end up, or those Atlantic province teams. Now, whether it's going to change much is debatable, because again, even if Division III changes their rule, well, they have the CCHL to go to. You have the OJ to go to, and remember, a lot of the kids that signs go down there are not students. So I don't know if I see a lot of growth in this league. I think it is what it is. Do I see a ton of growth in it? Probably not. It's something that, see growth in a league. I think in Canada, it's going to be a very stagnant growth for Tier 2 in general. I think it's going to be a very stagnant sort of growth. But this isn't a league. This isn't a league that I see a major bounce for. If anybody's going to bounce, this isn't a league that's likely to have a bounce.
See, I think this league is very interesting because I think it could improve, but I think it's going to improve if the Quebec League draws the attention that they would hope. If the Quebec League gets bigger, like if they're drawing more attention, I could see the Maritimes being a big benefactor of that. maybe getting some more American players. Like, I think it's also, I think it's important for American players to realize too that, like, hey, now that major junior option is open, like if you don't, like I would put obviously put the North American Hockey League above the Maritime League, but if you don't make the North American Hockey League, if you were to go to Maritimes, I mean, now you are playing in a system that, if you develop and play your cards right, maybe you do go up to the Quebec Major Junior League. Who knows, right? It's like now, like that whole dynamic changes now. And I honestly think that the Maritimes, if them combined with the Quebec League, the Quebec Major Junior League, if they execute everything properly, I think the Maritimes could be a big benefactor in this whole thing.
You're forgetting two things. For the U.S. kids, now every Quebec League team is to have a scout in New England. So the U.S. kids will move to the Quebec League from the NCDC and for their prep teams and whatnot, just like any Ontario league that comes out of AAA hockey out here. They're going to do it through those ways. And
yeah, but it's a lot easier there, right? Like they could affiliate the kid there and and like what you were saying about the colleges and stuff, the same thing applies there, right? Like they're in the territory there. Like it's a much easier move. I mean, I'm not saying that it's going to be flooded with guys going, with guys going up all the time, but I think that it's a unique opportunity now that didn't exist, 8 months ago.
The interesting thing is Quebec Major Junior League teams already have talked to some NCDC teams about working agreements, and so have Ontario League teams talking to North American League teams about sending players.
Oh, I'm sure they have.
And so I think that's going to be the preferred model. And remember, in Quebec, there's CEGEP. And CEGEP is something people aren't very aware of, but it's a secondary hockey league in Quebec. And if you're a Quebecois, you're probably going to stay there in a Francophone school playing CEGEP. So do I see them getting a ton of guys going in from externally from outside of the Maritimes? Outside of the Maritime kids they're already getting. No, I don't. It's not like in Ontario, you have some cities here that you can attract kids to. Like, some of those OJ teams are right near Toronto. It's an attractive place to play. Kids say, hey, not that far from the border. Nice, beautiful place to play. You play up near Ottawa in the Central Ontario League. Yeah, beautiful city. You can say, I'd love to play there. Then, of course, you even look out west, Vancouver. Where's a more beautiful place to be than Vancouver? Now here, I don't think they have those selling points. And New England kids don't like to leave home, remember. They leave home kicking and screaming. They do that going to the Quebec League. But
it's not just about the New England kids, though.
Yeah, I just don't see other kids going. Because do I see Quebecois going? No, I don't. Do I see the Maritime kids going? They already do. So you get the same Maritime kids. There are only so many more Maritime kids in sparsely populated provinces. It's not like you have zillions of people there. And do I see Ontario kids going out there? Absolutely not. No way. They'll go to the United States. Is what they're going to do. If they're not going to play in Ontario, they'll go to the United States.
Yeah. I don't know. I think it depends. I think it depends. I mean, I think it depends on. Could depend on different factors too, right? Because like if the kid, the Ontario kid, if he can't, like if he's not going to play in the NA, right? The only place in the United States maybe he'd look at is the NCDC. I mean, it really depends. I mean, I think it depends. It also, I think there's a lot of factors here.
An Ontario kid will stay at home in the CL. What'll be is there'll be a kid that's cut by the OJ or the CCHL. They'll stay at home. Because the point being is an Ontario kid is going to do one of two things. They have great hockey at home. Why leave? Now the BCHL.
I had an Ontario kid that went to the Maritimes and they paid for his schooling.
Once in a great
while. That was nice.
Look, we might have a player from Greenland playing the NHL. You'll have one kid. We have a 7-foot Russian playing in AAA hockey now. I believe there'll be a wave of 7-foot Russians. No, there's one. But you're playing.
Yeah, but I don't believe that my guy was the only one. Like, I mean, like I've seen the Maritimes. I've seen the Maritimes teams like throw around like pretty good money and stuff. Like I don't believe that he was the only one.
Very few. All I can tell you is the mentality of Ontario kids. Ontario kids, why would they leave home? Because they're taken care of in Ontario. Why would the vast majority of Ontario kids leave home? It's like Minnesota kids. How many kids are to leave Minnesota to play high school hockey somewhere else than play in Minnesota? They're not gonna. There's that hometown factor. You're gonna stay at home. Now, if they're gonna throw money around, but how many of those teams can afford to throw money around? We established as a poor area of Canada.
I don't think. Yeah, but I think those teams have money. I mean, I don't think I don't because even when I've worked trades like with other teams out in out in Western Canada and stuff, like that's been one thing that they've complained about. They've been like, oh well, if the kid's playing in Maritimes, we're not dealing with that because they're gonna ask for max value for every kid, and I think it's because of what they're it could be because of what they're providing and because of what they're used to. It's what they're used to trading for players. It's the same thing like with the GOJHL, right? Like GOJHL Junior B. There's a ton of money in that league. They're trading players regularly for like 10,000, 12,000, 15,000 a player, right? So then a Canadian Junior A team offers that Junior B league. They offer somebody in that, in a team in that league to be like, hey, we'll give you 5,000 for that player, which is the Junior A max, right? That team's all insulted, like 5,000, like we trade for 15, like.
When I was in American Hockey, we get a first-round NHL draft and offered $250,000 to play minor league hockey.
What'd you say?
But how many? We had a minor league player, a first-round NHL draft place, offered about $250,000 to play in the AHL that year. All right. Now, the fact of the matter is, you can afford to pay one guy that, not very many. And in the end, you just sit there and look at it. You gotta look at the odds. The type of player that's going to go there isn't going to be that Division I guy or that real hot prospect. It's going to be a guy that is saying, oh, my God, I better get money while I can now because I'm never getting any more money in my life. Or this be a guy that nowhere else to go.
But I don't think we know that yet because we haven't entered the first season. Like this is all going to be new, right? Like I think it's going to depend on how they set it up. Like I'm not saying I think that the kids are going to come running to the Maritimes automatically. I'm saying I think if it's executed properly between the Quebec League, the Quebec Major Junior League and the Maritimes, I think the opportunity is there to see that league grow, right? I'm not saying that I see it done yet or that I think it like again, like we're at the very beginning of this. I think it's going to be very interesting to see how they set it up, but I think the opportunity is there, right? I'm not saying it's been set up yet. I'm saying I think the opportunity is there.
I just think very limited opportunity. It's a lot like swimming against the green. It's like me as a prep school going out to Minnesota saying, I'm going to recruit a Minnesota high school player. I'm going to revolutionize Eastern prep hockey and go to all Minnesota super team. You might get one kid from Minnesota that for some reason is hated in his hometown or whatever. He wants to come east. You're offering him a scholarship he's not getting in Minnesota. You tell me you get 20 good Minnesotans. They're not. You're going to get one. You might get two. But in the end, as I say, the Maritimes, you've got to understand a little bit about Canada. That is not the place every player wants to play in Canada. And Canadians aren't that different from Americans. We have New Englanders that like to stay home. We have Minnesotans that like to stay home. Same thing in Canada.
Yeah, of course.
They want to travel 1,000 miles away from home. And add on, especially if there's really good hockey just around the corner. It's not like we're talking about Florida kids who have to leave Florida at some point. So you're dealing with an area that, again, I think it is what it is. And I'm not totally busting on the Maritimes. Great hockey, great people, tremendous major junior hockey. But they just don't have the same population as other parts of Canada, nor are the economics there to attract. And most importantly, it's the geography. How many guys are really going to go out there? It's like, again, from other parts of Canada, I don't see it necessarily happening. And the Quebec Major Junior League, remember, Quebec Maritime League, pardon me, it's still the Quebec Maritime League. A lot of those Quebec kids, Quebec aren't going to want to leave home. They're going to say, I'll stay home, or they might come down to the United States, so they'll work on their English and maybe go to
but those guys will play in but we're going to get to that league in a second, right? Like they're going to play in the Quebec Junior A League, right? Or Quebec Junior AAA as they call it, right? Like No. I'm saying the Quebec Junior AAA League, right? That's the last league that we have left to do here. But I think like I said, I'm not saying that this stuff has been rolled out yet. It hasn't, right? I think that there's opportunity to see that league grow. I think that league has a lot of opportunity to grow, but I don't think they can do it without the Quebec Major Junior League doing what they need to do, right? I think it's going to be dependent on what happens with the Quebec Major Junior League.
Again, I don't see it being a strong motivation because, again, farming out, they're already talking about farming out to the United States, the Quebec teams. So
but it's just talk though, right? Nothing's been done, right? Like that, like I'm saying, like I think that there's a lot of opportunity depending on what winds up happening.
I think it shows me what they're thinking. It says they're thinking there's very good hockey in the United States, and you have a league there that has no restriction on imports. So we like the idea of having our players play in the United States. I think there's a lot, and for some of those teams in Quebec, it's actually closer to have them play in the United States. So I'm not 100% certain. There's something, I'm not saying it couldn't happen. I'm just saying it's not, to me, one of the more likely things. And the Maritimes are a great region. You have a lot of great people, a lot of great hockey, a lot of great things. But do I see that league being one that has a, I think it is what it is. Now, could it change a little bit and be a little bit more of a farm league? Maybe for some of the young kids. But again, they love their AAA hockey up in Quebec. And
yeah, but it's not in Quebec though, right? We're talking about the Maritimes.
Well,
right,
I'm
like the
saying
Quebec is a whole
Maritime-
different is a separate animal.
Maritimes have some fabulous AAA hockey too, and some of their kids come play in the U.S. too.
Yeah.
They have guys that played at Shattuck and whatnot, and play in New England. So I mean, I don't see necessarily that you're going to have those patterns change because they already have their. And again, even in Ontario, how much do we use the farm teams? We don't use them an extreme amount. We might place a draft choice there for a year, and he comes up. Then yeah, we'll do that. But it's not like you have guys going up and down a lot in our league.
But see, I think that's where it might be a little bit different. I think that the Quebec League does utilize the Maritimes a good amount, right? And you're talking about the talks of affiliation. There are like affiliations now in the Maritimes, right? So like what they're talking to the NCDC about, like a lot of those relationships already exist and have for years in the Maritimes. And I'm not saying that they won't pick the NCDC over the Maritimes. I'm just saying I think that the point that we're with the state that hockey's in today, with the state that junior hockey's in today, I think that window is open for the Maritimes to do something that improves their product, that improves their product.
The big important thing in Quebec is, remember, probably the Quebec Maritime League will have the least impact of all three major junior leagues, the rule changes, because there are less kids coming out of that region to play Division I than the Western Ontario. We're actually having a bigger leakage factor, kids to the United States. The leakage factor, the West probably has the worst leakage factor, losing top quality players. So in terms of losing top quality players, they aren't losing them nearly at the rate we are, number one. Number two, how many guys will go to play in the league? We're hearing a number of good New England kids are talking about playing in Quebec, but do I see it being a huge flood? No, there'll be more than any of us thought. But at the same time, I think it's be a gigantic flood rushing to the Quebec Major Junior League, the Quebec Maritime League. No, I do not. I think that probably.
That's what I said from the beginning, right? It's going to depend what the Quebec Maritime League does. Right. Like if they, it's going to depend on the execution. Right. And it hasn't been done yet. I'm saying if it's executed properly, depending on what they do. And if they get the influx in, if they do what they have to do to market the league and make it appealing for guys to get that influx in, I think that the Maritimes can be a benefactor. The Maritime JrA League, I think it could be a benefactor of that. Right. I'm just saying, I think like that's what I think could happen.
The influx to Quebec will be based upon how much money they want to pay New England kids to go. Because the fact of the matter is,
who knows?
Because it's going very much against the cultural map of New England. And I can tell you, I've been at this for 40 years. Cultural maps are hard to fight. And trying to fight that whole New England thing of staying at home, going to BU, et cetera, is be a really tough thing to fight.
Oh, I'm not saying it's not. I'm not saying it's not. That's what I'm saying. I think it's dependent on the execution, right? Like they got it's a battle. There's a tough battle ahead of them, right? That's why I'm not saying it's automatic. I'm saying like depending on what happens, depending on the execution.
The thing is, if you're going to change that culture, the execution is you'd better go to North Korea and find the best brainwashing expert they have, because that's the only way you're going to get New Englanders to start changing their way around and send guys to Major Junior. It's not going to happen. It's their culture. It's like trying to get, I don't know, it's, you take two enemies in the world and make them suddenly buddies. You're not. It's like Minnesota kids. If you think you get Minnesota kids to suddenly rush to Major Junior, you've never been to Minnesota.
I don't know.
It's not.
I think a lot of times too, all it's going to take is you telling the kid, hey, get your ass to the Quebec Maritimes League. It's better than the NCDC.
I think what it'll be is,
if they get the support from the colleges, that's going to say a lot. If these colleges start telling the kids, hey, go there, I think that's going to be a big part of it.
Yes, they do. But a lot of those colleges are very protective of their kids. They don't want to put them at. I just am saying, do I see BU telling kids to leave Boston to go play in Quebec City? I don't see that happening a lot. For one thing, they have a relationship with the New England hockey community. Do I see the University of Minnesota saying, "Gee, you ought to go play in Regina"? I don't see that happening.
You don't think so? You don't think a top end Division I program would tell their kid to go play in the top end junior league?
Again, you sit down and look at Minnesota people. They believe the USHL is a top major junior league. They believe it's
but there is no USHL in New England, right? Like that could make sense, right? But I'm saying, like, in terms of BU telling the kid, right? What's the alternative?
They might tell the kid, go play in Green Bay. We have a great relationship with Green Bay. It's in the United States. I just don't see this rush of kids running. I don't see it happening. This rush of kids running out of New England. You'll have some top kids that'll be there, because there's a lot of financial incentive for them to do that. Whether it be paid or not illegally, that may be the case. Not like no disparaging things, but like that happen. Yeah, there could be teams that offer payments and various.
Yeah, I mean, places. I think we'll save time.
But more to the point, I think it'll be more a case of a kid that really is a top NHL pick that really sees, there's a financial reason for you to do this. Yeah. And I'm not going to say I don't think teams are going to do the financial thing, but I think I
think time will tell. Time will tell. I mean, the major junior is the best level of hockey there is. I mean, I think and I think people will pursue it. But let's it
is except for two things we do have to consider before we get off this. Is number one, we do have Americans who like the United States League. And two, the National Hockey League. Don't make any mistake about it. When that meeting comes next week, they'll come up in defense of the USHL as well as the CHL.
Yeah, they could.
Well, we don't want the USHL damage. We don't want the CHL damage. We want you both to coexist. So I think there's going to be a lot of sitting down and saying, let's find ways to meaningfully coexist. So I'm not sure you're going to have this whole thing of sending everybody to Canada. I'd like to see that, but do I expect it? I'm not holding my breath on that one.
No, I don't think you're going to see everybody go either. I'm saying is I think that there's opportunity for the Maritimes. I could see the Maritimes being a benefactor depending on what happens. And we're not going to get completely off the Maritimes. But what type of players do well in the Maritime? Or actually, I think we did get that already. I think we did get that. It's going to be kind of similar to the CCHL. But I think the CCHL is a better league. Historically it's been it's been above it. So it's I think the CCHL is a bit ahead of it. Similar. The last tier 2 Junior A league is the Quebec Junior AAA Hockey League. They call it Junior AAA, but that's what we know tier 2 Junior A everywhere else. Where do they promote players to? Typically, the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League, probably Canadian University, maybe the odd guy, NCAA. You might see, again, they're probably few and far between the NCAA, whether it's Division I or Division III. And I think that's the most geographically isolated, and obviously with the language barrier, I see that league kind of being the most kind of on its own. And Jason, if you're still with us, we're going to get to your question. But yeah, typically where do they promote to? That's what I see. A lot of Quebec Major Junior Hockey League. Bill, what do you think?
Here's what it is. It's a league that always has been there, and it sort of exists in the shadows. I mean, the big AAA studs in Quebec go right to the QMJHL. So it sort of exists in the shadows. And a lot of the better Quebec law guys, you find a lot of Quebec law down here playing junior instead of playing up there. They'll come down. I see a lot of Quebec law, NCDC, and are the NA. They tend to filter if they're not going right to the QMJHL to the United States.
What did you say? I'm sorry.
Most Quebec law. I'm saying you have a lot of guys there that are playing in the United States. They're playing the NCDC or playing the NA. If they don't go directly out of AAA to QMJHL, an awful lot of them tend to gravitate to the United States. It's not like they're this league is sort of, again, existent in the shadows. The top studs are going to go right up to the major junior, and some other guys, if that's not, and even some guys aren't happy if they're drafted. Like you have the kid that was drafted by Ruin Miranda, who's playing in Trenton right now. Is playing for Mercer. Came down to the NCDC. He didn't go to the Quebec League. He came down to NCDC to play. You have guys in Wilkes-Barre, a whole bunch of Quebec and Wilkes-Barre.
Yeah.
So you have quite a few of them come down here to play. They'll come down and play in New England typically.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And then what type of players typically do well in the Quebec Junior AAA Hockey League? I find it to be a very offensive minded league. So definitely, definitely an offensive minded league. A lot of skating, speed, skill. So those are the kinds of guys that I find typically do well in that league, Bill.
Yeah, it's definitely a little bit more like it's just Quebec style hockey. It's a little bit fire wagon.
Yeah. So, all right, there you have it. Those are the 12 Tier 2 Junior A hockey leagues in North America. We covered them all. Yeah, and we have a question here from Jason, and if it's been quiet tonight with the comments, I know you guys have kind of just been listening and taking us in. If you have any questions or comments or concerns, throw them up now because we are going to end this. We try to keep these around an hour, but I wanted to get through all these, so we definitely went over tonight, and then Bill and I had our debate in the middle of this, so towards the end of it. But
12 teams too, 12 leagues.
Yeah, 12. Leagues. Yeah, it's a lot. So we tried to fly through them, but wanted to get through. Wanted to make sure that we covered them all. So yeah, those are the 12. And again, guys, all kidding aside, I know the EHL announced themselves as a Tier 2 league. They are not a Tier 2 league. They're a Tier 3 league. So that's why we didn't cover them tonight. But very good Tier 3 league, the most consistent Tier 3 league, the tightest Tier 3 league. They do a lot of very good things, but they are Tier 3. Jason wants to know which of these Canadian leagues are the most receptive of American-born players. Which Canadian leagues have the most American players? Honestly, like Jason, I think they're all receptive. I mean, I think you'll see the least amount of players in the Quebec Junior AAA League. I think that's because of the language barrier and because they're kind of like out there on an island. I don't think a lot of Americans want to go there. I mean, I've been doing this for a long time. I've never had a problem with one of my Americans mistreated in Canada, or not being receptive, accepted or appreciated. Me personally, I've never had bad experience with that. For me, it's always they just want the best players. Prove to them that you're going to help them win games. Just like I said at the beginning of the show, that's all they want. As far as which Canadian leagues have the most American players, I would probably say, the BCHL just because of the import rule. Like they're, the rest of the Hockey Canada's, for Junior A, they've got an import rule. BCHL, they should be wide open. And Bill, maybe this, there either is no import rule or it should be a lot higher. But I would say the BCHL probably has the most Americans. But yeah, again, I'll let you take both of those questions back around, Bill.
The import rule in BC League is kind of ass backwards. You have to have a minimum number of British Columbia produced players, not Canadian, but British Columbia produced players. It's not a huge number. You have to have a minimal number of BC produced guys in the province. So, they count anybody from outside of the province as sort of an import in that aspect. So, yeah, they have a more relaxed import rule. As far as most players, yeah, BC probably does. I think the Western leagues have a fair amount. Some of the Ontario leagues, I think the Maritimes have far less. I think Quebec, you have obviously, I don't think they have any. If they have any, it's very few, maybe a few kids from right across the border. I think the Superior League doesn't have many. The OJ does have some, and so does OJ, so does the CC. And all the Western leagues unquestionably do, but probably the BC League probably is the most. And they all are receptive. The only thing is, remember, you are the new kid on the block up there. They don't know you as well, and there are limitations in those leagues. And remember, with an import, that carries a lot of burden. Like if you're to come to the Canadian Hockey League as a European, our standard for how good you have to be, we don't want a mediocre European. You better be damn good. We're not going to West Base a card on you. So it's not like they want to bring an American up there to get a certain litmus test, and you're going to have to produce. And again, you are the new kid on the block, so you really have to produce when you get up there. It's not like they're to cut you a lot of quarter like they might for a local kid and say, okay, we know this kid is good. We'll stick with him, and maybe in a year he'll be good. It's not going to happen. You've got to produce immediately, and you got to really make a convincing argument for yourself right there.
Yeah.
Because they probably haven't seen you much, probably don't know you very well.
Yeah. Perform, help them win games. I think that the import rule with JrA for Hockey Canada should be 6. So to Bill's point, you have to be one of the best 6 Americans that they can find. If you're going to go up there as an American forward, you got to be more valuable than the American D, the American goalies. You got to be one of the best 6 Americans at any position that they could find. So typically a lot of teams will shy away from using an import spot on a backup goalie, depth forward, or, bottom pair defenseman. And one thing to the American point that I would say, and this isn't even an American thing, this is a non-Ontario thing with the OJHL. I find that the OJHL, I don't want to say cliquey, but it could be seen as cliquey, because you have to understand it's so saturated with high-end hockey players in the Toronto area that you have a ton of players that don't bill it. They're all local. Like, they're putting these teams together at this level, this good, and they're local guys. So a lot of these kids, they did grow up together. So it could be, if you're billeting in the OJ, depending on the team, right? Like, I had a kid one year that was billeting. I think he was the only billet on his team, or they may have one other billet, right? And practice was over and everybody went about their normal lives that they have been their whole life, right? So again, it could seem cliquey, but it's not really cliquey in like the, in like the negative way. It's just that these kids, their home, their everyday life that they've been doing for 17, 18, 19, 20 years still exists around them, right? They're leaving practice and going to grandma's house, or so there is something to, think about there as well. Again, not saying don't go to the league. It's a great league. Just something to be aware of.
Well, they also save money on a billet, remember, if they don't have to bring our guy in. And there is that natural regional prejudice. Like, do you think that the NCDC doesn't prefer, the New England teams don't prefer New England kids? Of course they do. You don't think teams in Minnesota and with Minnesota coaches, the USHL, don't prefer Minnesota kids? Of course they do.
And that's what anything in life, right? You're always going to go with what you know, right? Or what,
Look, I know my Atlantic kids, all right? Do I have a certain favoritism to them? Of course I'll bring a player in if he's a clearly better player than them. Of course, needless to say.
Right, but Ty goes to the runner, they're the runner.
I've known the guy for 8 years. I know what type of kid he is. I know how he's developing. I've seen his development pace, and I am a lot more familiar with him. I sit there and say to myself, I feel more comfortable with him than a guy that is I wouldn't say of a huge different ability, but if they're remotely close, if they're
right.
I'm going to take the familiar local kid, and it's not anything politics or anything. It's just comfort zone. You say I know this.
You trust it, right? Again, what I said at the beginning of the show. Prove to a team you could help them win games. Prove that, right? Yeah. That's what you got to do. But yeah, guys, that's going to be it for tonight. Thank you for sticking around with us, for the guys that are still here. We went like 50 minutes over, but
sorry about that, guys.
there's a lot of stuff to go over, but we wanted to give it to you guys. I guess we could have even broken this into 2 shows, but whatever, we did it tonight. So yeah, that's going to be it for tonight. As far as Swan Hockey Digital, the new rewards program, we're almost there. We're almost ready for launch. You could join the Discord and visit Web3 support to find out more, ask any questions. If you need help with any of that, you could learn more about Swan Hockey Digital at swanhockey.io or in the Discord. We'd love to hear from you guys. And that's going to be a wrap for tonight. We'll be right back at it this upcoming Tuesday. Same time, Tuesday, 9 p.m. Eastern. We will be with Justin Friedman, the director of scouting for the Madison Capitals in the United States Hockey League. So we're going to be heading back over to the USHL. We heard from Fargo Force, Carrie Eads last week. So we're going to be, heading back to the USHL next week. Yeah, we heard from Carrie, and then we heard from, from Nicole Bouchard with the Quebec Remparts and the Quebec Maritimes Junior Hockey League last Thursday. So, heading back to the USHL this Tuesday. yeah, come join us, and I will see you guys there. Bill, thank you very much. Pleasure as always. I know we always have a good time doing these things.
Sure.
So yeah, no, thank you very much. And
Sure.
and anything you want to close with, Bill?
No, not much. Just guys, remember that there are a lot of places that the one thing that some teams have a better time drawing, like I said, some areas in Canada because people are more familiar with them, closer to the border. Some are big cities, and that's an advantage they certainly have. And you're going to see some changes, and I think that everything's be done above board. Nobody's going to be breaking rules or anything or this. I think you're going to see what flow you have. There'll be rumors about that. There won't be. If guys go to Quebec, it's going to be, or to Ontario or the West, just because they see best opportunity there. But the USHL is still going to be maintained as a player. The NHL and is very clear on that. They want all the leagues to be winners here. And I think in the end, they all will be winners. They're going to find a way to make that work. They're going to find a way to work between the three leagues on that. So. No, the CHL, USHL, and NHL.
So, yeah. So, no, so good stuff. Yeah, the last, what I want to say in closing, two things. One, use this information, pick a league that suits you best, right? Not everybody's built for every league. You want to build yourself for success. If you're not an NA style player, don't sit there trying to play in the NA. Go play somewhere else that suits your style, where you're going to be successful, where you're going to be able to show off what you do well, so somebody can see you and say, hey, I need that. I want that. And listen, there's guys that they can't, they're not NA style players and they have a better shot at playing in the USHL. So just be yourself, pick a spot that suits you where you get to be yourself and do what you do well. And then last closing remark, I'm going to close this the same way I opened it. Finish your season, right? For you guys that are still in the middle of, are still at the tail end of your seasons here, you got to have a great rest of your season. Without a great today, there is no tomorrow. Stay focused, live in the moment, here and now, stay focused on the task at hand, and go have a great rest of the season. That's the biggest thing you can do right now to help yourself for next season. All right. Everybody have a fantastic night. Thanks again for joining us tonight. Thanks for sticking with us. I know we went over, we wanted to cover all this, but thank you guys very much. Bill, thank you very much to you. Have a great night, Bill, and everybody else have a great night.
All right.
Thank you, Bill. See everybody Tuesday.
Bye. Bye.